You never really know who's watching. Emma Williams thought to herself as she wiped down the counter, the clink of dishes and hum of the diner's old jukebox filling the background. It was another late shift at Rosie's diner, and she had already wiped the same counter 3 times, just to keep her mind busy. The night was unusually slow, and the quiet seemed to stretch on forever. Outside, a soft drizzle turned into a steady rain, tapping against the windows in a rhythmic beat. The door opened with a gust of wind, and in walked a man, his coat soaked through. He stepped in with an air of quiet confidence, his dark hair matted against his forehead, and his eyes scanning the room with detached interest. The kind of man who could probably buy everything in this diner, Emma thought. He didn't notice her at first, just pulled his collar higher and walked straight past, muttering something about a table. Emma had seen his type before, but something about his hurried steps and distracted gaze made her feel oddly intrigued. She moved quickly to grab the menu, her movements careful, practiced. She stopped just short of him, her voice polite but neutral. "Good evening, sir. Would you like to sit at the window or by the counter?" The man looked up at her, his gaze meeting hers for the first time. For a split second, she saw a flicker of frustration in his eyes, but then it was gone, replaced by a faint smile. "Window's fine," he said, his voice low and rich, with a hint of irritation hidden beneath the calm exterior. Emma led him to his seat without a word, and he sank down, his shoulders slumping as if the weight of the world was pressing on him. He didn't take off his coat, nor did he bother looking at the menu. Emma knew better than to ask him again what he wanted. He'd order when he was ready. As she turned to leave, she noticed his phone buzz on the table, the screen lighting up with a series of unread messages. Emma didn't think much of it, but she couldn't help noticing the tension in his posture. He was somewhere else, lost in a world she would never be a part of. She went back to the counter, glancing at him every now and then, as if she couldn't stop herself. She went through the motions, refilling coffee cups, cleaning the same spot on the counter again, and listening to the quiet rhythm of the diner. Time passed, and she forgot about him for a moment, only to look up and find him staring at her. His eyes weren't cold now, but something else, something softer, more thoughtful. Emma held his gaze for a second, surprised at the sudden warmth in his expression. Then he spoke, his voice breaking the silence of the room. "I don't know what it is about this place. It's like I can't get my mind off it." She paused, not sure what to say. She hadn't expected him to say anything at all. "Maybe it's the quiet," he added, almost to himself. "Maybe it's just you." Emma blinked, unsure how to respond. She gave a polite smile, but her heart was beating faster than usual. "Can I get you something to drink?" she asked, her voice steady. He looked at her for a moment longer, then shook his head. "I'm fine," he said quietly. "Just thinking about things. I didn't expect to end up here." His words hung in the air, leaving an uneasy tension between them. Emma stepped away, unsure of what had just happened. As the night wore on, the man stayed in his seat, staring out the window into the rain, lost in thought. Emma went on with her shift, but her mind kept drifting back to him. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to him than met the eye. Maybe it was the way he looked at her, like he could see right through her, or maybe it was the way he looked so out of place in the diner, like he didn't belong. And then, just as quickly as he had arrived, he stood up, pulling on his coat and walking toward the door without another word. Emma watched him leave, the sound of the bell above the door ringing in his wake. She stood still for a moment, lost in thought. It was only after he was gone that she realized she hadn't even asked for his order. But somehow, it didn't matter. The strange thing was, she didn't feel like she needed to know. She just knew there was something about him, something she couldn't quite place. The night continued on, but Emma felt the weight of the moment lingering in the air, like a memory she couldn't let go of. Emma returned to the counter, trying to focus on the usual rhythm of the diner, but her thoughts kept drifting back to the man who had sat in the corner. There was something about him, something she couldn't shake. She wiped the same spot on the counter again, the soft hum of the jukebox her only companion. The door opened again, a burst of cold air sweeping in as a couple of regulars entered, chatting loudly. Emma forced a smile, slipping into her usual role of the quiet waitress, but the stranger's face lingered in her mind. She moved swiftly to the table, taking their order without missing a beat, all the while distracted by thoughts of him. She had seen all kinds of people come and go, but there was something different about him. It wasn't just the way he looked, though his sharp features and expensive coat stood out in the room. It was the way he carried himself, like someone who had seen too much of the world to be impressed by anything anymore. As the night went on, the diner started to empty, the familiar faces making their way out into the cold. The clock ticked on, and Emma found herself standing at the window, staring out into the rain, her mind still on the man. It was almost closing time when the door opened again. This time, she didn't need to look up to know it was him. The soft thud of his footsteps on the tile floor drew her attention. He didn't sit down at a table this time, though. Instead, he walked up to the counter, his eyes meeting hers without hesitation. For a moment, neither of them spoke, the silence stretching between them like a thin wire. "I didn't expect to see you again," he said finally, his voice low, but not unfriendly. Emma blinked, unsure of how to respond. "I didn't expect to be here either," she replied, her words sounding almost too casual. "What can I get you?" He looked at her for a second, as if considering her question. Then he sat down at the counter, his coat still on. "Just coffee," he said. "Black." She nodded, moving behind the counter to pour him a cup. As she placed the mug in front of him, their fingers brushed briefly. He looked at her again, his gaze lingering just a little too long. "Thank you," he said quietly. Emma shrugged, unsure of why the moment felt so charged. She turned to walk away, but then stopped herself. "You're welcome," she said, the words slipping out before she could stop them. She couldn't help herself. There was something about him that made her feel like she needed to be more than just the waitress. She returned to her work, but her mind kept drifting back to him. When she looked up again, he was still there, staring into his coffee. He hadn't touched it yet. His fingers drummed lightly on the mug, a slow, rhythmic beat. She couldn't help but wonder what he was thinking. "Why do you come here?" she asked, the question surprising her as much as him. He didn't seem caught off guard, though. He looked at her, his expression unreadable. "I don't know," he said after a long pause. "Maybe because it's the only place that feels real." Emma stared at him for a moment, unsure of how to respond. The honesty in his words caught her off guard. She wanted to ask him more, but something held her back. Instead, she just nodded, and he took a slow sip of his coffee. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. It was simply there. And for the first time in a long time, Emma didn't feel the need to fill it. She went back to her work, but every time she glanced at him, her heart seemed to beat a little faster. He wasn't like the other customers, and she knew that. She didn't know how, but she felt like she was starting to understand him in a way she hadn't with anyone else. The night wore on, and the sound of the rain outside seemed to grow louder, but Emma stayed where she was, watching him as he finished his coffee. It was only when he stood up to leave that she realized how long he had been sitting there. "I'll be seeing you," he said, his voice quiet but purposeful. She didn't know why, but she felt a strange sense of loss as he turned to leave. She watched him walk out the door, his figure disappearing into the night, the rain already starting to wash away his presence. The diner was quiet again, and Emma felt something shift inside her. It wasn't the kind of change she could name, but it was there, lingering in the stillness. The next few days passed in a blur for Emma. She woke up early, went to work, and came home late, the routine feeling like a never-ending cycle. But something had changed. She kept thinking about him, Andrew Scott. It wasn't just his face that lingered in her mind, but the way he had looked at her, the way his words had hung in the air, full of meaning. He was different from the usual customers. There was a quiet weight to him, something that made Emma curious. She hadn't expected to see him again. After all, people like him, people who seemed so disconnected from her world, didn't come back to places like Rosie's diner. Yet, she found herself looking up at the door every time it opened, half hoping to see him walk in again. Days passed, and the feeling didn't fade. She didn't know why, but it wasn't just about the strange connection she felt. It was something deeper, something unspoken that made her feel like he had glimpsed a part of her no one else had. It was Wednesday when he walked in again. The rain was pouring down outside, the kind of rain that made everything feel heavy, but he didn't hesitate. He stepped in, wet but composed, like he had done this 1,000 times. Emma noticed him immediately. He walked straight to the counter without even glancing at a table. She wiped her hands on her apron, her heart beating a little faster. "Another coffee?" she asked, her voice steady. He didn't answer at first, just gave her a small nod, as if lost in thought. She moved behind the counter, her eyes on him, waiting for him to speak. "I don't suppose you remember me," he said, finally looking up at her, a small, almost sad smile playing at the corner of his lips. Emma's heart skipped. She wasn't sure what to say. "Of course I remember you," she replied, surprised at how easily the words came. He raised an eyebrow, his smile growing just a little. "You do?" he asked. "You're hard to forget," she said, keeping her tone casual, even though she could feel her cheeks flushing. He chuckled softly, a sound that was low and sincere. "I didn't expect to hear that," he said. "I didn't expect to come back." She didn't know why she felt the need to say this, but she did. "I didn't expect you to either," she said quietly, almost as if to herself. For a moment, the air between them seemed to thicken. He looked at her, and she could feel the weight of his gaze. He wasn't just looking at her as the waitress anymore. There was something different in his eyes, something that made her feel like she was being seen for the first time. "I've been thinking about our last conversation," he said, breaking the silence. "And I realized. I didn't ask you about yourself." "There's not much to tell," Emma replied quickly, trying to brush it off, but there was a part of her that felt the need to explain. She paused, taking a breath. "I'm just a waitress. A regular person." He leaned in a little, his gaze never leaving hers. "You're more than that," he said, his voice soft but clear. "I've seen people like you. People who don't just go through the motions. People who actually care." Emma looked away, not sure how to respond. She wasn't used to hearing things like that. People didn't say those kinds of things to her. They usually just saw her as the girl who brought the coffee. She focused on pouring his coffee, trying to ignore the way his words made her feel. She handed him the cup, their fingers brushing for just a second. He took it from her, his eyes still on her, studying her with an intensity that made her uncomfortable and oddly flattered at the same time. "You have no idea how rare that is," he said, almost to himself. Emma didn't answer. She didn't know what to say. She wasn't sure why she felt so exposed, so vulnerable, just by standing here in front of him. She didn't know why he made her feel this way, but for the first time, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as invisible as she thought. He took a slow sip of his coffee, his eyes never leaving her face. "I've been looking for someone like you," he said, his tone quieter now, almost hesitant. Emma didn't know how to process his words. She was just a waitress. Just a small-town girl trying to get by. Yet, somehow, in this moment, it felt like everything had shifted. She didn't know what to do with that feeling, but she couldn't shake it. She didn't know where this was going, but she felt like something had just started, something that would change everything. The days that followed were filled with the usual routine. Emma woke up early, worked through long shifts, and returned home late, her mind still occasionally drifting back to Andrew Scott. Every time the door of the diner opened, her gaze would flicker toward it, almost expecting him to walk in again. But the door stayed empty for the next few days. The silence of those days felt different, heavier somehow. It wasn't just the quiet of the diner, it was her own thoughts, still echoing with the brief moments she'd shared with him. She told herself it was nothing. He was just another customer, and nothing more. But every time she saw him, It was like a small piece of her world shifted. His words still lingered in her mind, and when she allowed herself to think about it, she couldn't help but wonder why he seemed to see something in her that others didn't. Why did he look at her differently? What was it about her that caught his attention? Those questions circled in her mind, but she pushed them aside, focusing instead on the work in front of her. She had a job to do. On Friday, just as the evening rush started, the door opened again. She didn't need to look up to know who it was. She could feel his presence in the way the air seemed to shift. Andrew walked in, his usual confident stride tempered by something else, a quiet weariness. He made his way to the counter, not glancing at any of the empty tables, as if he was drawn here for a reason he couldn't explain. Emma straightened up from wiping the counter, a slight knot in her stomach as she walked toward him. She hadn't expected him to come back. She hadn't expected anything. "You're back," she said, the words slipping out before she could stop them. He nodded, his lips curving into a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "I've been thinking about our conversation," he said, his voice calm, but there was an undercurrent of something. Uncertainty, maybe. "I wasn't entirely honest the last time we spoke." Emma looked at him, not sure what to make of his tone. "What do you mean?" she asked, her curiosity piqued. "When I said I was just looking for someone like you," he began, his voice softer now, almost hesitant. "I meant it, but I didn't tell you why." Emma didn't respond immediately, unsure of where this conversation was going. He was different now, not the confident, aloof figure from before. He seemed almost vulnerable, like he was struggling to say something he hadn't meant to reveal. "You're not just a waitress, Emma," he continued. "I know that now. You have more to offer than just serving coffee." Emma swallowed, her heart thudding in her chest. She wasn't sure what to say. Was he complimenting her? Was he simply trying to be polite? She didn't know, but there was a strange warmth spreading through her chest, and it made her feel both uncomfortable and strangely touched. "I'm just doing my job," she said finally, her voice quieter than usual. "I'm not anything special." He looked at her for a long moment, as if trying to gauge whether she believed that or not. "You're wrong," he said, his tone firm. "I've seen people like you. People who hide behind the simple things. But I know there's more to you. I can see it." Emma didn't know how to respond to that. She had spent so much of her life hiding, keeping herself small, blending in with the background. She didn't want to stand out, didn't want anyone to notice her too much. But here was a man, someone who could have anyone in the world, saying that he saw something in her. She wasn't sure if she was flattered or overwhelmed. "I don't know what you see," she said softly, looking away, unable to meet his gaze. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, neatly folded card. He placed it gently on the counter in front of her. "I want to help you," he said, his voice quiet but sincere. "I want you to come work with me." Emma's breath caught in her throat. She looked down at the card, her fingers hesitating before reaching for it. "I don't know what to say," she murmured, her heart racing. He smiled again, though this time it was different, softer, more genuine. "You don't have to say anything yet," he said. "But I'd like you to think about it." As he turned to leave, Emma watched him walk out of the diner, his figure disappearing into the rain-soaked night. She stood there for a long moment, the card still sitting on the counter in front of her. She didn't know what to think. Was this real? Could someone like her really have a place in a world like his? The questions swirled in her mind, but one thing was clear: whatever happened next, her life had already started to change. It had been 3 days since Andrew had left the diner, and Emma couldn't stop thinking about the card he had left behind. She told herself she wasn't going to call him. It was a ridiculous idea. She was just a waitress, and he was, well, he was him. A man who lived a world far beyond her reach. She had heard the stories, seen the headlines, and understood the kind of life he led. People like him didn't stay in small diners like Rosie's, and people like her didn't belong in his world. But that card sat on her nightstand, mocking her with its possibilities. She picked it up every morning, ran her fingers over the embossed letters, and every time, the weight of the decision seemed to grow heavier. It was a cold Thursday evening when she finally decided to stop thinking about it. She had been working all day, her feet sore, her mind tired, but there was something about the rain outside that made her feel like she had no other choice. She had already told herself 100 times that nothing would change, that the diner was all she had, that this was her life. But she was tired. Tired of staying still. Tired of feeling like she was invisible, even though she worked so hard to be seen. So, after her shift ended, she took a deep breath and dialed the number on the card. The phone rang twice before a deep voice answered, one she recognized instantly. Emma? Andrew's voice was softer than she remembered, less guarded. It's me, she said, her heart beating faster with each passing second. I was thinking about what you said. There was a pause on the other end. She could almost hear him processing her words. You're calling. His voice held a note of surprise. She bit her lip, unsure of where this conversation was going. Yeah, she said, a nervous laugh escaping her. I guess I am. I'm glad to hear that, he replied. I've been hoping you would. I don't know what I'm doing, she admitted, her voice quieter now, almost embarrassed. I don't belong in your world. I'm just a waitress. A small-town girl. There was silence on the other end, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was thoughtful, like he was waiting for her to finish, and when she did, he spoke again. Emma, he said softly. It's not about where you're from or what you do. It's about what you can become. And I see something in you that's rare. You're not just a waitress. You're someone who cares, someone who can make a difference. She didn't know how to respond to that. His words were like a spark, igniting something deep inside her that she didn't know was there. I don't know if I'm ready, she said, the uncertainty clear in her voice. I'm scared. I don't want to fail. You won't fail, he said firmly. I wouldn't ask you to do this if I didn't believe in you. Take the step, Emma. You deserve more than this. His words hit her like a wave, washing away her doubt, even if just for a moment. She didn't know what the future held, but in that moment, something inside her shifted. Okay, she said, her voice trembling slightly. Okay, I'll do it. Good, he replied. I'll arrange everything. You'll start when you're ready. After they hung up, Emma stood there, the phone still pressed to her ear, a mix of excitement and fear swirling inside her. It wasn't just the job that scared her. It was everything that came with it. The unknown. The change. She knew it was going to be hard, but for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel so small. She didn't feel invisible. She felt seen. And maybe, just maybe, she could be more than what she had always thought she was. She glanced at the card one last time before tucking it into her pocket, a small but significant step into a new world, a world that was no longer out of her reach. The following week, Emma found herself standing at the entrance of a sleek, glass building in downtown Manhattan. It was nothing like the small town she had grown up in, and the world before her felt like a dream she had never allowed herself to truly imagine. She had never seen a place so polished, so professional. The doorman greeted her with a nod, and she stepped inside, feeling both out of place and oddly determined. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was here for something bigger. As she rode the elevator up to the office, her palms felt clammy, her heart racing. It wasn't fear, it was anticipation. The unknown had always scared her, but now, it felt like the kind of challenge she could meet head-on. When the elevator doors opened, she stepped out into a pristine, modern lobby. The receptionist looked up and smiled, her eyes immediately scanning Emma's attire, perhaps noticing the subtle difference between her diner uniform and the crisp suits worn by everyone around her. "Can I help you?" the receptionist asked, her voice professional and polite. "I'm here to see Andrew Scott," Emma said, her voice steady, even though her mind was whirling. "He's expecting me." The receptionist nodded, picking up the phone to inform someone about Emma's arrival. Emma felt her heart beat in her chest. She had been wondering about this moment all week. Was she really ready for this? Could she really keep up with the world Andrew inhabited? She had spent her life in the background, serving others, blending in, never really stepping forward. But now, it was different. She was different. A few moments later, a man in a sharp suit walked toward her, extending his hand with a warm smile. "Emma, it's good to finally meet you," he said. "I'm David, Andrew's assistant. He's expecting you." David led her through a maze of hallways, each room more immaculate than the last. The walls were lined with art, and everything about the office screamed wealth and success. As they approached Andrew's office, Emma's nerves spiked again. What if she didn't belong here? What if she failed? But then she remembered why she was here. She wasn't just a waitress. She had something to offer. David knocked on the door and then opened it. "Emma's here, Andrew," he said before stepping aside. Andrew looked up from his desk, his eyes immediately meeting hers. There was a small smile on his face, one that made Emma feel a little more at ease. "Emma, welcome," he said, standing up to greet her. "I'm glad you could make it." She stepped into the office, the door closing softly behind her. "Thank you for this opportunity," she said, her voice quieter than usual. She wasn't sure what to say, but she was grateful for the chance to prove herself. "I know it's a big step," Andrew said, his tone gentle but firm. "But I believe in you. You've got the potential to do more than you think." Emma nodded, trying to ignore the fluttering in her stomach. She was here to do more, to be more. She wasn't going to let this opportunity slip through her fingers. Andrew gestured to a chair across from his desk, and Emma sat down. "So, let's talk about what comes next," Andrew said, opening a folder in front of him. "You'll be working with me closely on several projects. I want to see how you handle pressure, how you think on your feet." Emma listened closely as he outlined her responsibilities, all the while trying to stay focused, trying not to let the weight of the moment overwhelm her. She had worked so hard to get here, to push herself beyond the limits she had set for herself. This was her chance to prove she belonged. The meeting went on for an hour, and Emma found herself slowly getting more comfortable. Andrew was direct but encouraging, and he made sure to ask for her input on several ideas. She couldn't believe how natural it felt to be in this space, to be asked for her opinion, to be treated like she was just as capable as anyone else in the room. When the meeting ended, Andrew stood up, offering her his hand once more. "I'm excited to have you on board, Emma," he said. "I think you're going to do great things here." Emma shook his hand, a small smile playing on her lips. "Thank you," she said, her voice steady, her confidence growing with each passing second. As she left his office, Emma couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. This was just the beginning, but she knew that no matter what happened next, she was ready. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was someone who had the power to change her own life. The next few weeks were a whirlwind for Emma. She had started working alongside Andrew, diving into projects and tasks that pushed her in ways she never expected. The office was like nothing she had ever experienced before. The pace was fast, the pressure constant, but there was a feeling of exhilaration that came with it. Every task she completed, every challenge she faced, made her feel like she was growing into something more than she had ever imagined. Andrew's faith in her seemed to spark something inside her. She wasn't just going through the motions anymore, she was actively shaping her future. But even as she thrived in the new environment, there were moments when the weight of it all hit her. Late one evening, as she was reviewing some financial reports in her office, the exhaustion finally caught up with her. She leaned back in her chair, staring at the screen, her mind buzzing with numbers and strategies, but her body felt like it was on the edge of giving out. Her phone buzzed on the desk, breaking her out of her thoughts. It was a message from her mom. "How's everything going? I'm proud of you, Emma." A wave of emotion hit her. Her mother had always been her biggest cheerleader, the one who believed in her when no one else did. Emma had worked so hard to get to this point, and yet, a part of her still couldn't believe she was here, in this sleek office, working on projects that mattered. She stared at the screen, trying to push the thoughts away, but they lingered. Was this the life she wanted? Was she meant to be a part of this world, a world so different from the one she had known? Her phone buzzed again. It was a reminder from Andrew. Don't forget we have a meeting at 10 a.m. tomorrow. Be ready. She sighed, running a hand through her hair. She was ready. She had to be. The next morning, Emma stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the collar of her blouse. She looked at herself, wondering how she had gotten here. She wasn't the same girl who had walked into the diner all those weeks ago. She had changed, and though it was still hard to admit, she was proud of that change. She had earned her place in this world, and she wasn't going to let anyone tell her otherwise. She arrived at the office early, as she always did now, ready to face the day. The meeting went smoothly, and afterward, Andrew pulled her aside. "I've been impressed with your work lately, Emma," he said, his voice sincere. "You're adapting faster than I thought. Keep it up." His words made her heart swell with pride, but there was something else, something she couldn't quite explain. She had earned his respect, but she had also begun to respect herself in a way she never had before. As the days passed, Emma settled into her new role. She found herself enjoying the work, the challenges, the feeling that she was truly making a difference. But there were still moments when she questioned it all. Was she truly ready for this world? Could she handle the expectations that came with it? One afternoon, Andrew called her into his office. She walked in, her stomach tight with nerves. He was sitting at his desk, a serious expression on his face. "I need to talk to you about something important," he said, motioning for her to sit. Emma sat down, her mind racing. What had she done wrong? "We're taking on a new project," he said, sliding a folder across the desk to her. "It's big, and I need someone I can trust to lead it. I think you're the right person." Emma looked at the folder, then back at Andrew. "Lead it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "You want me to lead it?" Andrew nodded. "I do. I've seen your potential, Emma. This is your chance to step up. It's a big responsibility, but I think you're ready." Emma sat there, stunned. She had been working hard, pushing herself, but this was a different level. Could she really do it? Could she take on this responsibility? But as she looked at Andrew, she realized that he saw something in her that she hadn't fully seen in herself. Maybe it was time to believe in that vision, to step into it fully. "Okay," she said, her voice steady. "I'll do it." "I knew you would," Andrew said with a smile. "I have no doubt you'll excel." As Emma left his office, she felt a rush of adrenaline course through her. She wasn't just a part of this world anymore, she was about to take the lead in it. And for the first time in her life, she believed she was ready. The following weeks were a blur of meetings, deadlines, and decisions. Emma dove into the new project with everything she had, her mind constantly racing as she navigated the complexities of the task. There were moments when she felt overwhelmed, the weight of the responsibility pressing down on her, but she kept going, determined to prove to herself, and to Andrew, that she was capable. Every day was a new challenge, and each challenge was a new opportunity to grow. She had become more confident, more assertive, and with every passing day, the doubt that once clouded her mind began to fade. She was no longer just the girl who had worked at Rosie's diner, she was someone who could make things happen. But even with all the success, there were moments when the pressure threatened to break her. Late one evening, she found herself alone in her office, staring at a presentation that just wouldn't come together. Her brain felt foggy, and the exhaustion from the constant rush of work was starting to take its toll. She leaned back in her chair, running her fingers through her hair, frustrated. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. She looked up to find Andrew standing in the doorway, a slight smile on his face. "I thought I might find you here," he said, stepping inside. "Everything okay?" Emma smiled tiredly, gesturing to the piles of paperwork on her desk. "Just a little stuck," she admitted. "I'm trying to get this presentation together, but my brain's not cooperating." Andrew walked over and leaned against the desk, his gaze steady as he looked at her. You've been pushing yourself really hard, Emma, he said. You're doing great, but you don't have to do it all alone. You've got a team here, and they're ready to help. Emma sighed, feeling a mixture of relief and guilt. She had always been the type to take everything on herself, to believe that if something was going to get done right, she had to do it. But hearing Andrew's words, she realized he was right. She didn't have to carry the burden alone. I guess I've just been trying to prove something, she said quietly. To myself, mostly. I don't want to disappoint anyone. Andrew nodded, understanding. You don't have to prove anything to anyone, Emma. You're already doing more than enough. Just remember, it's okay to ask for help. Emma looked at him, her heart swelling with gratitude. Thanks, she said softly. I needed to hear that. For the first time in weeks, she felt a sense of peace settle over her. She wasn't in this alone. She didn't have to carry the weight of it all. As Andrew left her office, he turned to her with a smile. Get some rest tonight, he said. You'll come back tomorrow with fresh eyes and new ideas. Emma nodded, grateful for his words, and as she gathered her things to leave for the night, she felt a lightness in her chest that had been missing for so long. She had a long road ahead, but she wasn't afraid anymore. She had a team. She had support. And for the first time in a long while, she felt like she belonged. The next morning, she walked into the office with a renewed sense of purpose. She still had a long way to go, but now she knew that she didn't have to face it all alone. She was ready to take on the next challenge, and the next, with the confidence that only comes when you know you're not carrying the weight by yourself. The sun was setting as Emma walked through the quiet streets of the city, the soft orange glow casting long shadows across the pavement. The hum of the city felt distant, almost like it was part of another world, one she no longer felt a part of. She had just finished a long day at work, a day full of new challenges and accomplishments, and as she walked, she felt a quiet sense of contentment settle in her chest. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, a message from her mom. How was your day, sweetheart? Emma smiled to herself and typed back a quick response. Busy but good. I'm starting to feel like I belong here. As she hit send, she realized that it was true. She belonged. She had worked hard for this, and the journey had been long, but she had arrived. She didn't need anyone's approval to know that she had earned her place. She passed by the familiar diner, the one that had once felt like her entire world, and stopped for a moment, staring through the window. The neon sign flickered softly, casting a warm light inside. She could see the worn counter, the same stools she used to sit at, the same faces coming and going. But now, it felt like another lifetime. The memories were still there, but they didn't define her anymore. She wasn't that girl anymore, the one who had only dreamed of something bigger. She was the woman who had made it. A few moments later, she turned and walked on, the weight of her past and present blending together in a quiet harmony. She didn't need to look back. She knew where she was going. As she rounded the corner, she noticed Andrew standing outside a cafe, his figure silhouetted against the fading light. He was looking down at his phone, but when he heard her footsteps, he looked up. His face softened with a smile as their eyes met. Hey, he said, his voice warm. How was your day? Emma smiled, feeling a sense of calm wash over her. It was good, she said, her voice steady. A little overwhelming, but good. He stepped closer, his gaze never leaving hers. I knew you'd handle it, he said quietly. You've always had it in you. Emma felt her heart skip a beat at his words. She didn't need to say anything. She just nodded, her smile saying everything that words couldn't. There was no need for explanations or reassurances. She was where she needed to be. They stood there for a moment, the world around them fading into the background. It was a simple moment, but it felt like everything had come full circle. I'm glad you're here, he said, his voice low, almost like a secret. I'm glad you're finally seeing what I saw all along. Emma looked at him, her heart swelling with something she couldn't name, something that felt both familiar and new. She didn't need to say anything in return. She just let the silence hang between them, a quiet understanding passing through the air. She had found her place, and it wasn't in the diner, or in the office, or in anyone else's expectations. It was here, in this moment, with the city stretching out in front of her and the world at her feet. And as she walked away, the evening air cool against her skin, she realized that sometimes the most important moments in life are the ones that don't need words at all. It's the quiet moments, the small gestures, the silent understanding that change everything. The city's hum continued around her, but in that moment, all Emma could hear was the steady beat of her own heart. And it was enough.